Okay, Pat. I want to start with just sort of asking you a little bit about your background. Right?
Sure.
You come from commercial real estate. I come from commercial real estate.
Definitely.
And now we've entered the world of investing, right? Investing for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Syndicating,
Yep,
buying short-term rentals. I bought some single families. Don't ask me why. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I want to understand what your journey's been like, and then I want to share a little bit about what my journey's been like. Because I
Definitely.
think you and I come from a little bit of a different world, right? The commercial real estate world.
For sure.
A little more sort of suits and buttoned up.
Very tight. Yeah.
Very tight. So tell me a little bit about your background and what your journey's been like so far.
Yeah. So I graduated college in probably the worst economic time since the Great Recession, right? So that was a challenge. So we started in brokerage because they were the only people hiring because they didn't have to pay you. So I started at Marks & Millichap, and I was there for about 20 minutes. And I'd always wanted to be in development. So throughout college, I wrote handwritten letters to all the developers in Chicago, all of them, over and over and over again. And finally got a few meetings and met with one of them, Beitler Real Estate. And he's like,
That's Paul Beitler. Yep.
Beitler, yep.
Okay. Yep. A legend in the city of Chicago.
Yeah. And he's like, you know what? You have to have an MBA and a JD. I want nothing to do with you. And then I kept going back and kept going. And finally, one day, he took off his glasses and he's like, all right, sell me these glasses right now. And I'm like, all right. And I held up my resume. And I'm like, can you read the third line for me? And he goes, you could start tomorrow. So that's how I started with Beitler.
Wow.
Yeah, yep. And I started in tenant rep and then moved to the product side, then the development side.
So I just heard something that I think is absolutely key, that doesn't matter what industry you're in, you have to be relentless.
Totally.
And you have to be creative, and you have to be customized, right, to whoever the audience is. So if there's something that you want, you go after it until you get it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's right, like especially in our business. Yeah.
Yes.
You cannot stop.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, awesome. Great beginning. And so you start with Paul Beitler.
Yep.
And are you doing tenant representation? Are you doing leasing? What are you exactly doing?
So I'm exclusively doing tenant rep at the start. And I'm just in my suit and tie in the middle of July going up and down LaSalle Street and knocking on doors and, right, trying to build the floor plates and everything else. And I'm just grinding and grinding and grinding. And then we took over the leasing for 208 South LaSalle when the JW Marriott had just finished. So
I know the building well.
Yeah, the hotel was done, and then there was still the office component.
Yep.
So I was leasing that, and then I did a crash course at Kellogg, like a 6-month program for underwriting, and wanted to have that because I wanted to ultimately get into development. And Beitler wasn't having it until I was ready to go. So then I ultimately graduated into the development team.
Amazing. I'm wondering why our paths didn't cross at 208, because I represented tenants and we looked at 208
Oh, really?
on multiple occasions. Never did a lease there, but we did look at it.
Well, I was going to say, it was, I was just a lily pad until you got to the building you were actually going to do a deal at, because the landlord wouldn't spend any money in TI or CapEx or anything. So,
I think I remember that, and that's why we didn't do a deal there.
It was the dogs, for sure. And I pitched so hard, the hotel component and the hotel and the spa and everything else. And then once you got to the office, it's like, okay, well, here we are. All right, you're on LaSalle Street. So, yeah, I didn't do a ton of deals, but yeah, it was a good learning experience for sure.
So it's really funny to hear you talking about walking up and down LaSalle Street and building the stacking plans, because I have this vivid memory of working at CB Richard Ellis. God, that was now 17 years ago, right? So I started in commercial real estate myself in 2004. I started with CB Richard Ellis. I didn't start on a team because nobody wanted me. I'm not sure they knew what to do with me. So I started alone at a desk with a phone, basically 50 dials a day, right? Trying to build your book of business. And one of the things that I did was I thought, God, I really need to know these buildings better than I do, because, people could, I watched some of the guys, right, that I worked with that could just, oh yeah, so-and-so is on the 4th floor in 25,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, shit, like I need to be able to do that and I can't.
Yeah.
So I took 2 days and I took a little pad and paper and a pen, and I walked up and down LaSalle Street and memorized building after building after building.
Nice, yeah.
Who's the anchor tenant? What are the floor plates? What are the issues with this property? So when you started talking about that, you were taking me back to that moment of hell.
Totally, a little PTSD from
PTSD
for sure
from trying to build my knowledge in commercial real estate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I love this, and then. So you're 208 South LaSalle, you're doing tenant rep, and you're transitioning into or wanting to do development.
Yeah,
and when you say development, talk to me, like what kind of development?
Yeah. So Beitler was formerly Miglin Beitler, MB Real Estate, and they had primarily done office in the CBD exclusively.
Right.
And by the time I had gotten to that point with the team, they were exploring more mixed use and multifamily hospitality. They were starting to do hotels. They had owned, right when I started, they owned actually both Drakes very briefly, but the one in Oak Brook and then the one downtown on Michigan Avenue.
Oh, interesting.
So I got to learn a little bit from that end too. But it got into the mixed use side, and then I had kind of pitched, and that's what got me onto the team, was more of the public-private partnerships. So municipalities will put out an RFP, and normally no one will touch it because they don't want to deal with the government, right? So, well, they're hairy deals, they're complicated, but they can be lucrative. And I'm like, well, let's go after, we did something in Madison, Wisconsin, the Quad Cities on the Illinois-Iowa border. We did one thing with the state of Illinois, but those mixed-use public-private partnerships.
Cool. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing the mixed-use public-private partnerships, you're the development team. Mm-hmm. They're financing to create and build some sort of mixed-use development in the city of Chicago. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's the government has something that they're trying to achieve, whether it's more parking or we need office space for this. We can't do it, so you contract it out. And then maybe there's a subsidy component, TIF dollars or opportunity zones or something like that. And you have that partnership, it's a JV agreement, and you are providing capital stack, sourcing and using, bringing the whole deal together to achieve one component that the government is trying to.
Cool. So, okay, so this sounds like, so you've got this deep experience, right, working in higher level development projects with very sophisticated people, right, with Beitler, Miglin, right? This goes back, this is like the history of Chicago, which
definitely,
is... There's a lot of stories there.
Oh, tons.
Lots of really interesting stories. In fact, wasn't Miglin murdered?
Yes. That was Andrew Cunanan. So that was Versace.
That's right.
So that documentary had come out. Andrew Cunanan bopped around, and on his stop from the Twin Cities down to Florida to try and find Versace, he killed Miglin.
That's right. Lee Miglin, correct?
Yes, yep. And Marilyn Miglin, right? Like all the Chicago people, right? The QVC queen and the pheromone perfume and all that. Yeah, yep.
Right.